Hi, I'm Natalie. I stood in my wedding dress at 3 p.m. on what should have been the happiest day of my life, staring at two empty seats in the front row where my husband's parents were supposed to be. Instead, I got a text message that read, "Decided to extend our Napa trip. Your little ceremony is trivial anyway, just something for someone at the bottom to feel important." 20 minutes later, I discovered they weren't in Napa at all. They were 3 blocks away at the country club, celebrating their anniversary party they'd never mentioned to us. That's when I realized this wasn't about missing my wedding. This was about putting me in my place. But what they didn't know was that their son had been secretly recording every cruel comment they'd made about me for months, and he'd just handed me the evidence that would change everything. The morning of May 15th started like something out of a fairy tale. Sunlight streamed through the windows of my downtown Portland loft, catching the ivory silk of my wedding dress as it hung from the closet door. I'd saved for 18 months to afford that dress, working double shifts at Lincoln Elementary and tutoring kids on weekends. Every penny had been worth it when I saw Tyler's face light up during our final fitting the week before. Lauren Davis, my maid of honor since college, was already bustling around my apartment with coffee and bagels, her auburn curls bouncing as she chattered about the timeline. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock at Riverside Barden's estate, a charming venue overlooking the Willamette River that Tyler and I had fallen in love with during our first visit. We'd booked it despite it being slightly over our budget because Tyler insisted his parents would appreciate the elegance. Victoria and Richard Whitman had been polite but distant throughout our 2-year relationship. They owned Whitman and Associates, a successful accounting firm in the upscale Hillcrest Heights neighborhood, and made no secret of their belief that Tyler was destined for someone from their social circle. I was a third-grade teacher from a middle-class family whose biggest crime seemed to be genuinely loving their son. Tyler worked as a junior accountant at the family firm, though he'd confided in me that he dreamed of starting his own practice focused on helping small businesses and nonprofits. His parents had different plans, grooming him to eventually take over their client roster of wealthy individuals and corporations. The tension between Tyler's dreams and his parents' expectations had been a constant undercurrent in our relationship. As Lauren helped me into my dress, I couldn't shake the nervous flutter in my stomach. Victoria had been unusually quiet during the wedding planning process, offering minimal input and declining to participate in traditional mother-of-the-bride activities. When I'd suggested we go dress shopping together, she'd replied that she was too busy with important clients to spend time on wedding theatrics. The phone rang as Lauren was fastening the last button on my dress. Tyler's voice came through breathless and strained. "Nat, I need to tell you something. My parents just called. They're not coming." My reflection in the mirror suddenly looked pale and distant. "What do you mean they're not coming? The ceremony is in 3 hours." They said they decided to extend their wine tour in Napa Valley. Mom said, and I quote, "Your little ceremony is trivial anyway, just something for someone at the bottom to feel important." Mom agreed and said they didn't want to waste their weekend on something so beneath their standards. Lauren's hands stilled on my veil. The silence in the room felt heavy and suffocating. I'd known Victoria and Richard didn't approve of me, but this level of cruelty was beyond anything I'd imagined. Missing your only son's wedding wasn't just rude, it was deliberately devastating. "Tyler, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" His voice cracked slightly. "I'm furious, Nat. I told them exactly what I thought of their behavior, but they just hung up on me. I'm done with their games. Today is about us, and I refuse to let them ruin it." After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to process what had just happened. Lauren knelt beside me, her green eyes filled with concern. "Natalie, honey, talk to me. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that this isn't really about the wedding," I said slowly. "This is about making sure I know my place. They've been testing me for 2 years, waiting for me to prove I'm not good enough for their son. Today was supposed to be their final victory." The ceremony proceeded, despite the conspicuous empty seats in the front row. Helen Rodriguez, our wedding planner, had quietly removed the reserved signs and shifted the seating arrangement to make the absence less obvious. My mother, Patricia Brooks, walked me down the aisle with tears in her eyes, both from joy and anger at the Whitmans' behavior. Tyler looked devastatingly handsome in his charcoal gray suit, his brown eyes never leaving mine as I approached the altar. When we exchanged vows, his voice was steady and strong, promising to always choose our family over anyone who didn't respect our love. The words felt like armor against the hurt of his parents' absence. Our reception was beautiful and intimate, filled with friends, colleagues, and my extended family who had traveled from across the country to celebrate with us. Tyler's best man, his college roommate Jake, gave a heartfelt speech about how Tyler had never been happier than when he'd started dating me. The absence of Tyler's parents was felt but not discussed, an elephant in the room that everyone politely ignored. As the evening wound down, Tyler and I were saying goodbye to the last guests when Lauren approached us with a strange expression on her face. She'd been networking with some of the vendors and had struck up a conversation with the photographer's assistant, who also worked events at the Hillcrest Country Club. Natalie, Tyler, I need to tell you something. Sarah, the photographer's assistant, just told me something interesting. The Whitmans weren't in Napa today. They hosted their 25th anniversary party at the country club this afternoon, same time as your ceremony. The words hit like ice water. Tyler's face went white, then red with rage. They were 3 blocks away? They chose to throw a party instead of coming to our wedding? Lauren nodded grimly. Sarah said it was a big affair. Probably 50 people, live band, the works. Victoria was in a silver gown talking about how wonderful it was to celebrate their love with people who truly mattered. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. This wasn't neglect or scheduling conflict. This was calculated humiliation. They had deliberately planned an event to coincide with our wedding, ensuring they had an excuse that sounded reasonable while making their priorities crystal clear. Tyler pulled out his phone and started scrolling through social media. Within minutes, he found what he was looking for. Instagram posts from several Hillcrest Country Club members showing glimpses of the Whitman anniversary celebration. Victoria and Richard were in every photo, smiling and toasting, clearly enjoying themselves while their son got married miles away. Look at this, Tyler said, his voice shaking with fury. He showed me a post from Victoria's friend Margaret, time-stamped at 4:17 p.m., exactly when Tyler and I were saying our vows. The caption read, "Celebrating true love and genuine class with the Whitmans. Some occasions are worth attending, others simply aren't." I stared at the phone screen, watching video clips of his parents dancing and laughing, surrounded by their wealthy friends. In one clip, I could hear Victoria's voice saying, "Thank goodness we didn't have to sit through some dreadful little ceremony today. This is so much more our style." Lauren had her arm around my shoulders. "Natalie, this is beyond cruel. This is psychological warfare." Tyler was frantically making phone calls, trying to reach his parents. Both their phones went straight to voicemail. He left increasingly angry messages, demanding an explanation and an apology. The messages were never returned. As we drove home that night, still in our wedding attire, I felt a strange calm settling over me. The hurt was there, sharp and deep, but underneath it was something else, clarity. For 2 years, I'd tried to win Victoria and Richard's approval, bending over backward to prove I was worthy of their son. I'd endured snide comments about my simple background, my modest career, my limited social connections. Now I understood that their approval was never available to someone like me. I wasn't born into wealth, didn't have family connections in their social circle, and couldn't bring business advantages to their firm. In their minds, I was an obstacle to their son's proper advancement, a temporary inconvenience to be discouraged until Tyler came to his senses. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated both Tyler's loyalty and my resolve. More importantly, they had revealed their true nature so completely that even Tyler could no longer make excuses for their behavior. Over the next few days, Tyler attempted to reach his parents multiple times. When they finally answered, 3 days after our wedding, their response was chilling in its casualness. "Tyler, darling," Victoria's voice came through the speakerphone in our loft. "How was your little event? I hope the weather held up." "Mom, you missed my wedding. Your only son's wedding. You were 3 blocks away throwing a party." "Oh, that." Her tone was dismissive, as if discussing the weather. "We had a prior commitment. Our anniversary is far more significant than some starter marriage to a girl who won't last 2 years." Richard's voice joined the conversation. "Son, you're young. You'll have other weddings with more appropriate partners. This one doesn't really count." I watched Tyler's face cycle through disbelief, hurt, and finally cold anger. This was the moment our real marriage began, not with the vows we'd exchanged at Riverside Gardens, but with Tyler finally seeing his parents clearly for who they truly were. "Mom, Dad, I need you to understand something. Natalie is my wife. She's not a practice run or a phase. She's the woman I chose to build my life with, and your behavior is absolutely unacceptable."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Victoria's laugh was sharp and condescending. "Tyler, please. You're being dramatic. When you're ready to be realistic about your future, your father and I will be here. Until then, don't expect us to pretend this little teacher is anything more than a temporary distraction." The call ended with Tyler staring at the phone in stunned silence. I realized this was probably the first time he'd heard his parents speak about me with complete honesty, without any pretense of politeness or social courtesy. That night, as we lay in bed in our new apartment, Tyler made a decision that would change everything. "Natalie, I need to tell you something. I've been recording conversations with my parents for months." I turned to face him in the darkness. "What do you mean?" "Ever since last Christmas, when Mom made that comment about hoping you'd find someone more suitable to your station before the wedding, I started feeling like I needed proof of what they were really saying. I set up a recording app on my phone whenever I talk to them. I have hours of audio." My heart started beating faster. "Tyler, what exactly do these recordings contain?" He sat up and reached for his phone. "Everything, Nat. Every cruel comment, every plan to undermine our relationship, every conversation about cutting me off financially if I married you. I have them discussing how to make you feel unwelcome, how to convince you you're not good enough, even conversations about potentially contesting our marriage if we went through with it." As Tyler played snippet after snippet of recorded conversations, I felt a mixture of heartbreak and vindication. Victoria's voice discussing how to manage the situation of my presence in Tyler's life. Richard strategizing about reducing Tyler's responsibilities at work to motivate him to reconsider his choices. Both of them laughing about my family's modest Christmas gifts and my pathetic attempts to fit in. But the most damaging recordings were the recent ones, where they discussed their anniversary party. It hadn't been a spontaneous decision to extend their Napa trip. They had planned the anniversary celebration specifically to conflict with our wedding, seeing it as the perfect way to send a message about their priorities without technically lying about having other plans. "We'll show Tyler and that little nobody exactly where they rank." Victoria's voice came through clearly on a recording from 2 weeks before the wedding. "If he wants to marry beneath himself, he can do it without our presence dignifying the occasion." Richard's response was equally cold. "It's perfect. We get to celebrate something actually worth celebrating, while making our position clear. Eventually, Tyler will realize he needs to choose between his family's legacy and this temporary infatuation." I stared at Tyler in the dim light of our bedroom. "Why didn't you tell me about these recordings before?" "Because I kept hoping they'd come around. I thought maybe if I could prove to them how much I love you, how good you are for me, they'd eventually accept you. I recorded the conversations as insurance, but I didn't want to believe I'd ever need to use them. And now?" Tyler's voice was firm with resolve. "Now I realize that some people will never accept what they've decided to reject. They've made their choice, and it's time I make mine." The next morning, Tyler called in sick to work for the first time in his career, and we spent the day listening to months of recorded conversations. What emerged was a clear pattern of manipulation, emotional abuse, and calculated cruelty. Victoria and Richard hadn't just disapproved of me, they had actively worked to sabotage our relationship from the beginning. They had discussed reducing Tyler's salary to make it harder for us to afford our own place. They had deliberately scheduled family events on dates when they knew I was available, then made comments about my absence when I couldn't attend work-conflicted alternatives. They had even contacted some of Tyler's college friends, trying to convince them to introduce him to more suitable women. The recordings also revealed financial information that Tyler hadn't known about. His parents had been discussing changes to his inheritance, planning to reduce his share of the family business if he married me. They had researched the legal requirements for disinheriting him entirely and had consulted with lawyers about protecting their assets from a potential divorce settlement. As we organized the recordings chronologically, I began to see the full scope of their campaign against our relationship. This wasn't just snobbery or disappointment. This was a coordinated effort to destroy our happiness and force Tyler back into their vision for his life. But Victoria and Richard had made a crucial error in their calculations. They assumed Tyler would never stand up to them, never choose love over financial security, never risk his comfortable position in their world for something as trivial as his own happiness. They had mistaken his previous compliance for permanent weakness. As we sat surrounded by transcripts and notes, I looked at my husband and saw a man who was finally free from the weight of impossible expectations. The hurt was still there, probably always would be, but underneath it was something stronger: determination. "So what do we do now?" I asked. Tyler's smile was slow and deliberate. "Now, we show them that people at the bottom sometimes know how to climb."
His parents acted as though nothing had happened, greeting him with their usual professional courtesy and discussing client accounts as if they hadn't just devastated their son on what should have been the happiest day of his life. Tyler's younger sister Cassandra worked as the firm's marketing coordinator, and she'd always been the family favorite. Unlike Tyler, who questioned their parents' methods and values, Cassandra embraced the Whitman legacy wholeheartedly. She'd married someone from their social circle, lived in a house her parents had helped purchase, and never challenged their authority on any meaningful level. On Thursday morning, Tyler received an unexpected visit from Cassandra in his office. She closed the door behind her and sat across from his desk with an expression he'd never seen before, a mixture of guilt and determination that made him immediately suspicious. "Tyler, we need to talk about what happened at your wedding," she began, her manicured fingers drumming nervously on her designer handbag. "You mean the fact that our parents deliberately chose to humiliate me and my wife instead of attending our ceremony?" Cassandra winced at his directness. "It's more complicated than that. There are things you don't know about the situation, things that might help you understand their perspective." Tyler leaned back in his chair, studying his sister's face. "What things, Cassie?" She took a deep breath and pulled out her phone. "I recorded a conversation between Mom and Dad 3 months ago. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I was in Dad's office late one evening and they came in thinking the building was empty." Tyler felt his pulse quicken. His sister had recordings too. "Play it." Cassandra's finger hovered over the screen for a moment before pressing play. Their father's voice filled the small office, clear and unmistakable. "The teacher situation is getting out of hand, Victoria. Tyler's completely infatuated, and if we don't intervene soon, we'll lose him entirely." Their mother's response was equally clear. "I've been researching Natalie Brooks extensively. Did you know her father died when she was 16? Heart attack, left the family with substantial medical debt. Her mother works 2 jobs just to keep their house. These people are desperate for financial stability." "So you think she's after Tyler's money?" "I think she's smart enough to recognize an opportunity when she sees one. Tyler earns a good salary here. He's set to inherit a portion of the business, and she's an elementary school teacher with student loans. The math isn't complicated." Tyler's hands clenched into fists as he listened to his parents dissect my family's financial struggles with clinical detachment. But the conversation continued, revealing something even more disturbing. "The real problem," Victoria's voice continued, "is that Tyler genuinely believes he's in love. He's not thinking strategically about his future or the firm's reputation. He's thinking with his emotions, and that makes him vulnerable to manipulation. What do you propose we do about it? We make it clear that marrying beneath his station will have consequences, real consequences. If he chooses this girl over his family's legacy, he chooses poverty over prosperity. Richard's voice took on a more calculating tone. We've been too soft on him. It's time to show Tyler what life looks like without our support. Reduce his salary, limit his client access, make it difficult for him to maintain the lifestyle he's accustomed to. And if that doesn't work, then we protect our assets and let him learn the hard way. Some lessons can only be taught through experience. Cassandra stopped the recording and looked at Tyler with tears in her eyes. There's more. Hours of it. They've been planning this campaign against your marriage for months. The anniversary party wasn't a spontaneous decision. They booked the country club the same day you sent out your wedding invitations. Tyler stared at his sister, processing the full scope of his parents' betrayal. Why are you showing me this now? Why didn't you warn me before the wedding? Because I thought maybe they'd come to their senses. I thought surely they wouldn't actually miss your wedding over their prejudices.
I was wrong, and I'm sorry. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small digital recorder. I've been documenting everything since that conversation. I love our parents, but what they're doing to you and Natalie is wrong. It's cruel and manipulative, and someone needs to hold them accountable. Tyler took the recorder with shaking hands. What exactly is on here? Evidence of financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and systematic harassment. They've been monitoring your bank accounts through the firm's payroll system. They know exactly how much you and Natalie spend on groceries, rent, everything. They've been using that information to make calculated decisions about your salary and bonuses. The revelation hit Tyler like a physical blow. His parents hadn't just disapproved of our marriage, they'd been actively sabotaging our financial stability to prove their point about my supposed gold-digging motivations. They've also been discussing legal strategies, Cassandra continued. Dad consulted with the firm's attorney about protecting their assets from potential divorce settlements. They've already moved significant funds into trust that would be inaccessible to you if they decide to cut you off completely. Tyler's voice was barely controlled. They're treating me like a hostile takeover target instead of their son. There's something else you need to know. The conversation I just played for you, it wasn't their first discussion about sabotaging your relationship. I have recordings going back 8 months, starting from the first time you brought Natalie to a family dinner. Cassandra played another clip, this one from the previous autumn. Victoria's voice was discussing strategies for making me feel unwelcome at family gatherings. We need to be subtle about it. Nothing overtly rude that Tyler could point to as evidence of our disapproval. Just enough discomfort to make her realize she doesn't belong in our world. What do you suggest? Conversational topics she can't contribute meaningfully to. References to places she's never been. People she doesn't know. Experiences she can't afford. Social exclusion disguised as natural conversation flow. Tyler remembered that dinner vividly. I'd come home feeling confused and hurt, unable to pinpoint exactly why the evening had been so uncomfortable, but knowing something was wrong. Now he understood that every awkward moment had been orchestrated. They've been studying psychological manipulation techniques, Cassandra said quietly. Mom bought books about it. Managing difficult relationships, strategic social influence, that kind of thing. She's been treating your marriage like a business problem to be solved. Tyler stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the parking lot. His father's Mercedes was parked in its reserved spot. The same car Tyler had admired as a child, dreaming of the day he'd be successful enough to afford something similar. Now it looked like a symbol of everything wrong with his family's values. Cassie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you involved in any of this? Have you been reporting back to them about conversations we've had? His sister's face crumpled. Not reporting, exactly, but they asked me questions about your marriage, about how you seem at work, about whether I think you're happy. I've answered honestly because I thought they were just concerned parents trying to understand your choices. And what have you told them? That you're happier than I've ever seen you, that Natalie clearly adores you, and that you light up when someone mentions her name, that your marriage seems genuine and strong despite their attempts to undermine it. Tyler felt a mixture of relief and gratitude toward his sister. Without realizing it, she'd been providing evidence that contradicted their parents' narrative about my supposed gold-digging motivations. Cassie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you willing to testify about what you've witnessed if this situation escalates legally? She nodded without hesitation. Tyler, what they're doing isn't just wrong morally.
Some of it might be illegal. Using the firm's resources to monitor your personal finances, making employment decisions based on your personal relationships, potentially violating privacy laws with their surveillance of your life. Tyler returned to his desk and pulled out his own phone, showing Cassandra the recording app he'd been using. I've been documenting things too. Hours of conversations where they've admitted to their manipulation tactics. For the next hour, Tyler and Cassandra compared their evidence. What emerged was a comprehensive picture of a two-person conspiracy designed to destroy our marriage through systematic psychological and financial pressure. Victoria and Richard had approached our relationship like a military campaign, identifying weaknesses and exploiting them with precision. They had researched my family's financial history, my student loan debt, my mother's employment situation. They had analyzed our spending patterns and adjusted Tyler's work schedule to create financial stress. They had even contacted some of my colleagues at Lincoln Elementary, asking carefully worded questions about my motivations for dating someone from a wealthier family. "Tyler, there's one more thing," Cassandra said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They've been planning to offer Natalie money to leave you." Tyler's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "A payout." Mom researched what she calls relationship termination agreements. The idea is to offer Natalie a lump sum to end the marriage and disappear from your life. They've calculated how much they think it would take to make her agree. "How much?" $50,000. They think that's enough money to tempt someone from her background while being insignificant enough to their net worth that it feels like a bargain. Tyler stared at his sister in disbelief. The casual calculation of my supposed price tag revealed a level of contempt that went beyond mere disapproval. His parents had reduced me to a mathematical equation, a problem to be solved with the right financial incentive. When were they planning to make this offer? Soon. They wanted to wait until after the wedding, let you enjoy the honeymoon period, then present it as a practical solution to an inevitable problem. Mom's convinced that Natalie will take the money and run once she realizes how difficult they're willing to make life for both of you. Tyler's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. My name appeared on the screen, and he answered immediately. "Nat, what's wrong? You sound upset." My voice came through shaky and confused. "Tyler, something strange just happened. I got a call at school from someone claiming to be from a law firm. They said they were conducting a background check for a potential inheritance case and needed to verify information about my family's financial history." Tyler's eyes met Cassandra's across the desk. "What kind of information?" "Details about my father's medical bills, our house mortgage, my student loans. When I asked why they needed that information, they said it was routine verification for estate planning purposes. But Tyler, I haven't applied for anything that would require a background check." "Nat, don't give them any information. Don't answer any more calls from unknown numbers. I'm coming home early today. We need to talk." After hanging up, Tyler turned to his sister with grim determination. "They're escalating. The background check call was probably their way of gathering more ammunition for their payout offer." Cassandra nodded. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give them exactly what they want, a clear choice between their son and their prejudices. But first, I'm going to make sure they understand the full consequences of the choice they've already made." Tyler spent the rest of the day copying files from his computer, documenting his contributions to the firm, and preparing for a confrontation that had been building for months.
By the time he left the office, he had enough evidence to prove that his parents' treatment of our marriage constituted harassment, financial manipulation, and potentially criminal invasion of privacy. That evening, Tyler and I sat in our small kitchen, surrounded by printouts, recordings, and documentation of his family's campaign against our relationship. The scope of their efforts was breathtaking in its thoroughness and chilling in its calculation. "Natalie, I need you to understand something," Tyler said, taking my hands across our secondhand dining table. "This isn't about you specifically. It's about control. They can't accept that I've made a choice they didn't approve, so they're trying to prove that my judgment is fundamentally flawed." I looked at the evidence spread across our table, feeling a strange sense of validation mixed with deep sadness. For months, I'd blamed myself for the tension with Tyler's family, wondering what I'd done wrong or how I could improve their opinion of me. Now I understood that their opinion had never been based on my actions or character. It had been based on their perception of my social and economic status. "What happens now?" I asked. Tyler's expression was resolute. "Now, we show them that people they've underestimated can fight back. And we make sure they understand that their behavior has consequences they never anticipated." The next morning, Tyler didn't go to work. Instead, he called David Chen, a lawyer who specialized in employment discrimination and family law. Chen's office was located in downtown Portland, far from the affluent Hillcrest Heights bubble where Tyler's parents conducted their business. Chen listened to our story with growing astonishment, taking notes as we played selected recordings and showed him the evidence Cassandra had provided. When we finished, he sat back in his chair and shook his head. "In 30 years of practice, I've seen a lot of family dysfunction, but this level of systematic manipulation is unusual. What your parents have done potentially violates several laws, including privacy statutes, employment regulations, and harassment ordinances." Tyler leaned forward. "What are our options?" "Legally, you could pursue civil action for emotional distress, financial manipulation, and invasion of privacy. The fact that they used business resources to monitor your personal life creates additional liability for the firm. Practically, you need to decide how far you're willing to go to protect yourselves and hold them accountable." Chen opened a file on his computer and began outlining potential strategies. "The recordings are admissible evidence in Oregon. The financial manipulation through your employment could result in significant damages. The harassment campaign targeting your wife could constitute stalking under state law." I felt a mixture of fear and empowerment listening to Chen explain our legal options. Part of me wanted to simply disappear, to avoid the conflict and pain of taking on Tyler's family. But a larger part of me recognized that their behavior would continue and escalate unless someone stood up to them. "What would you recommend as our first step?" Tyler asked. "Documentation and preservation of evidence. Formal notice to your parents that their behavior is unacceptable and must stop immediately. If they continue their harassment after being warned, we pursue civil remedies with the full force of the law." Tyler nodded firmly. "Let's do it. I'm done letting them treat my wife like she's disposable and our marriage like it's a business transaction they can manipulate." Chen began drafting a cease and desist letter that afternoon, outlining each instance of harassment, manipulation, and invasion of privacy. The letter demanded an immediate end to their surveillance activities, a cessation of employment-based retaliation, and a formal apology for their behavior. As we left Chen's office, Tyler took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Nat, are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we send that letter, there's no going back. My relationship with my parents will never be the same." I thought about the question seriously, considering the implications of the choice we were making. Then I thought about the recording of Victoria calculating my supposed price tag, the systematic campaign to make me feel unwelcome, the deliberate cruelty of missing Tyler's wedding to attend their own party. "Tyler, your relationship with your parents changed the moment they decided I wasn't worthy of basic respect. We're not destroying anything that wasn't already broken. We're just refusing to pretend it's okay anymore." Tyler smiled, and for the first time since our wedding day, I saw the weight of divided loyalty lift from his shoulders. He was no longer caught between his family and his wife. He had chosen, clearly and definitively, and that choice had set us both free. The cease and desist letter was delivered to Victoria and Richard Whitman on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9:15 a.m. Tyler watched from his office window as the certified mail carrier walked up the steps to the main entrance of Whitman and Associates. Within 20 minutes, the entire building seemed to vibrate with tension as word spread that the senior partners had received legal correspondence. Tyler's phone rang at 9:47. His father's voice was ice cold and dangerously quiet. "My office? Now." The walk down the hallway felt like a death march. Tyler had worked in this building for 3 years, but suddenly every familiar detail looked different. The expensive artwork, the polished marble floors, the plaques celebrating the firm's prestigious clients, all seemed like monuments to a world he was about to leave behind forever. Richard was standing behind his massive oak desk when Tyler entered, the legal letter spread open in front of him like evidence at a crime scene. Victoria sat in one of the leather chairs facing the desk, her usually perfect composure cracked just enough to reveal the fury beneath. "Sit down," Richard commanded, gesturing to the chair beside Victoria. Tyler remained standing. "I prefer not to." "This is not a request, Tyler. This is a family meeting, and you will conduct yourself accordingly. According to the letter you just received, this is a legal matter now. Family meetings are off the table until you can learn to treat my family with basic respect." Victoria's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Your family? Tyler, we are your family. That girl is a temporary distraction who has clearly manipulated you into betraying your own blood." Tyler pulled out his phone and pressed record, making sure the action was visible to both parents. "I'm documenting this conversation. Anything you say can and will be used as evidence if this situation escalates further." Richard's face flushed red. "You're recording us? Your own parents?" "The same way you've been recording and monitoring my private life for months. The only difference is that I'm being honest about it." Victoria stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the parking lot. "Tyler, this has gone too far. We raced you better than this. We gave you every advantage, every opportunity, and this is how you repay us? By siding with some nobody against your own flesh and blood?" "I'm siding with my wife against people who have systematically harassed and manipulated us for months. The fact that those people happen to be my parents doesn't make their behavior acceptable." Richard leaned forward across his desk, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Tyler, you need to think very carefully about what you're doing here. This firm, your job, your future financial security, all of it depends on your relationship with this family. Are you really willing to throw all of that away for someone you've known for 2 years?" Tyler felt the weight of the threat, but also the liberation of finally hearing his parents speak honestly about their motivations. "Dad, are you threatening my employment because I won't let you treat my wife like garbage?" "I'm explaining the reality of your situation. You have choices to make, and those choices have consequences." Tyler stopped the recording and immediately sent it to David Chen with a text message. "More evidence of employment retaliation. They're not even trying to hide it anymore." Victoria returned to her chair, composing herself with visible effort. "Tyler, we had hoped to handle this situation more delicately, but you forced our hand. Your father and I have prepared an alternative solution that might be acceptable to all parties." Tyler's stomach clenched, remembering Cassandra's warning about the payout offer. "What kind of solution?" Richard opened a desk drawer and withdrew a leather portfolio, placing it on the desk between them. "We've had our attorney draft a financial settlement agreement. Natalie would receive a substantial sum in exchange for agreeing to an amicable divorce and a confidentiality agreement regarding family matters." Tyler stared at the portfolio without touching it. "You're offering to pay my wife to leave me?" "We're offering to provide financial compensation for the inconvenience of a brief marriage that was clearly a mistake from the beginning," Victoria said smoothly. "It's a practical solution that allows everyone to move forward with dignity." "How much?" Richard opened the portfolio and turned it toward Tyler. The number at the top of the first page made Tyler's breath catch. $100,000. They had doubled their original offer, probably hoping the increased amount would be impossible for me to refuse. "This is generous compensation for someone in Natalie's circumstances," Victoria continued. It would pay off her student loans, help her family with their financial difficulties, and provide her with a fresh start somewhere far from Portland. Tyler studied the contract, noting the clauses that would require me to move at least 500 miles away and agree never to contact him or anyone connected to the Whitman family again. The document was professionally drafted and legally binding, designed to erase me from Tyler's life as completely as possible. "You've really thought this through," Tyler said quietly. "We've thought about what's best for our son," Richard replied. "This arrangement protects everyone's interests and allows you to move forward with a more appropriate partner when you're ready." Tyler closed the portfolio and slid it back across the desk. "I need to discuss this with Natalie before making any decisions." Victoria's smile was triumphant. "Of course. But Tyler, time is a factor here. This offer is contingent on Natalie's acceptance within 72 hours. After that, our approach to this situation will become significantly less generous." Tyler left his parents' office with the contract under his arm and a recording of their conversation on his phone. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt like descending into a different world, one where family loyalty was measured in dollar amounts and love was treated as a business transaction to be negotiated. At home, I was grading papers at our kitchen table when Tyler walked in carrying the leather portfolio. His expression told me everything I needed to know before he said a word. "They made the offer," I said. Tyler nodded and placed the portfolio on the table. $100,000. They want you gone within 72 hours. I opened the contract and read through the terms with growing disbelief. The document was thorough in its cruelty, designed not just to end our marriage, but to humiliate me in the process. I would be required to sign statements admitting that I had married Tyler for financial gain, that I had manipulated him emotionally, and that I was voluntarily removing myself from his life for his own good. "Tyler, this isn't just about money. They want me to confess to things I never did. They want me to validate their entire narrative about who I am and why I married you." Tyler sat down beside me and took my hands. "Nat, I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'll support you. If you want to take the money and walk away from this insanity, I understand. My family has made our life hell, and it's only going to get worse." I looked at my husband, seeing the exhaustion and pain that months of family warfare had carved into his features. For a moment, I genuinely considered taking the money. $100,000 would change my life in ways that Tyler's family couldn't understand.
It would pay off my student loans, help my mother, give me freedom to start over somewhere new. But then I thought about the contract's requirements. The forced confession, the promise to disappear, the implication that I was nothing more than a gold digger who had temporarily fooled their precious son. Taking their money would validate every cruel assumption they had made about my character and motivations. Tyler, if I take this money, they win. Not just this battle, but the war. They get to prove that I was everything they said I was, and you get to spend the rest of your life wondering if they were right. Tyler's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back for weeks. "But if you don't take it, they'll destroy us both. They have resources we can't match, connections we don't have. They can make our lives impossible." I stood up and walked to our kitchen window, looking out at the modest neighborhood we'd chosen for our first home together. The houses were small and the cars were practical, but the families were real. Children played in yards while parents watched from porches, building lives based on love rather than status. "Tyler, your parents think they understand me because they understand my bank account. They think my love has a price because everything in their world does. But they've made a fundamental miscalculation." I turned back to face him, feeling a certainty I hadn't experienced since our wedding day. "I didn't marry you for your money. I married you despite your money. I fell in love with a man who dreams of helping small businesses, who volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends, who cries during commercials with sick children. That man is worth fighting for, even if it means taking on his parents." Tyler stood and wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight against his chest. "Nat, are you sure? Once we reject this offer, there's no telling how far they'll escalate." "I'm sure, but I want to do more than just reject their offer. I want to investigate them the same way they've investigated me.
I want to know exactly who we're dealing with and what leverage we can use to protect ourselves. The next morning, Tyler called in sick again, and we met with David Chen to discuss our strategy. Chen reviewed the settlement offer with professional interest, noting the psychological manipulation embedded in its terms. This contract is designed to break you emotionally as much as legally, Chen observed. The confession requirements are particularly vindictive. They want Natalie to publicly humiliate herself as the price of her freedom. Tyler leaned forward in his chair. David, we want to investigate my parents' business practices. If they're willing to use firm resources to harass us, what else might they be doing that's ethically or legally questionable? Chen nodded thoughtfully. Financial firms are heavily regulated. If they've been using client information inappropriately, mixing personal and business interests, or violating fiduciary duties, there could be serious consequences. But investigating your own parents' business is a nuclear option. Are you prepared for the fallout? They declared war the day they decided my marriage was a business problem to be solved. We're just choosing to fight back instead of surrendering. Chen referred us to Marcus Thompson, a private investigator who specialized in corporate malfeasance and financial crimes. Thompson's office was located in a nondescript building downtown, far from the gleaming towers where Tyler's parents conducted their business. Thompson listened to our story with the detached professionalism of someone who had seen every variety of human greed and cruelty. When we finished, he opened a file on his computer and began taking notes. Corporate family dynamics often involve blurred ethical lines. Parents who view their children as business assets rather than individuals frequently engage in behavior that violates professional standards. The question is whether we can document specific violations that regulatory agencies would care about.
Tyler provided Thompson with detailed information about Whitman and Associates' client base, operational structure, and his parents' roles in the firm. Thompson outlined an investigation strategy that would examine their business practices, client relationships, and potential conflicts of interest. We'll start with public records, Thompson explained, business filings, regulatory complaints, court documents. Then we'll look at their professional associations, charitable activities, social media presence. People who are willing to manipulate their own family often leave evidence of similar behavior in their professional lives. Within a week, Thompson's investigation began yielding results that exceeded our expectations. Victoria and Richard Whitman's business practices were not just ethically questionable, they were potentially criminal. Thompson discovered that the firm had been charging clients for services never rendered, inflating billable hours, and recommending unnecessary financial products that generated commissions for the partners. More damaging, they had been using client information to make personal investments, a clear violation of fiduciary duty that could result in both civil and criminal penalties. The investigation also revealed that Tyler's parents had been systematically discriminating against employees who didn't fit their social profile. Women, minorities, and people from modest backgrounds were consistently passed over for promotions, excluded from important client meetings, and subjected to hostile work environments designed to encourage resignation. Your parents have been running their firm like a private club, Thompson reported during our second meeting. They've created a culture of exclusion and exploitation that extends far beyond their treatment of your marriage. The most damaging discovery came from examining the firm's charitable activities. Victoria served on the board of several nonprofit organizations, and Thompson found evidence that she had been steering lucrative accounting contracts to Whitman and Associates in exchange for personal donations that were actually funded by client accounts. This is charity fraud, Thompson explained. She's been using other people's money to buy social status and business connections. The IRS would be very interested in this arrangement. Tyler stared at the evidence spread across Thompson's desk. His parents weren't just snobs and manipulators. They were criminals who had been hiding their illegal activities behind a facade of professional respectability. Marcus, what happens if we report this information to the appropriate authorities? The Oregon State Board of Accountancy would launch an investigation that could result in license revocation. The IRS would examine the charity fraud, which could lead to criminal charges.
The clients who were overcharged could file civil suits for damages. Your parents could lose their licenses, their business, and potentially face prison time. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness looking at the evidence. Tyler's parents had destroyed their relationship with their son over their prejudices against me, but their behavior was part of a much larger pattern of entitlement and corruption. Tyler, this decision has to be yours, I said quietly. I won't ask you to destroy your parents' lives even after everything they've done to us. Tyler was silent for a long moment, studying photographs of forged documents and falsified billing records. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and resolved. Nat, they made this choice when they decided that laws and ethics didn't apply to them. How many clients have they cheated? How many employees have they discriminated against? How many charities have been defrauded so my mother could buy social influence? He turned to Thompson with determination in his eyes. File the reports, all of them. It's time someone held them accountable for their actions. Thompson nodded and began organizing the evidence into separate files for each regulatory agency. As he worked, Tyler called Cassandra to warn her about what was coming. Cassie, you need to start looking for another job. The firm is about to be investigated by multiple agencies, and it's not going to survive what they find. Cassandra's voice was quiet but unsurprised.
Tyler, I've been expecting this for months. The things I've seen, the way they treat people, I knew it couldn't last forever. What about you? Are you okay with what's about to happen? Tyler looked at me across Thompson's office, seeing the woman who had refused to be bought, intimidated, or driven away by people who believed money could solve any problem. I'm okay with the truth coming out, Tyler said. For the first time in months, I'm completely okay with who I am and what I'm doing. That evening, we sat in our small kitchen composing formal complaints to submit alongside Thompson's evidence. Each document we signed felt like another step away from the family Tyler had been born into, and toward the family we were choosing to create together. The investigation phase had revealed more than we expected to find. Victoria and Richard Whitman weren't just bad parents. They were criminals who had been using their position and reputation to exploit others for years. Our personal battle had uncovered a web of corruption that affected dozens of clients, employees, and charitable organizations. As we sealed the envelopes containing our complaints, Tyler took my hand across the table. Nat, are you ready for this? Once we submit these reports, we're going to war with people who have everything to lose. I squeezed his hand, thinking about the settlement offer still sitting in its leather portfolio on our counter. $100,000 to disappear and validate their assumptions about my character. The easy way out that would let them continue their pattern of corruption and manipulation. Tyler, I've been ready since the day they decided I wasn't good enough for their son. The only difference now is that we have the ammunition to fight back. The Oregon State Board of Accountancy opened their investigation on a Thursday morning in early June. By noon, federal agents from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division had arrived at Whitman and Associates with search warrants and boxes for evidence collection. Tyler watched from his office window as his colleagues stood in clusters around the parking lot, whispering about what could have prompted such dramatic government attention. Victoria emerged from the building at 12:30, her usually pristine appearance disheveled, her face pale with shock. She spotted Tyler through his office window, and their eyes met across the distance. Even from 3 floors up, he could see the moment she realized who had provided the information that brought her world crashing down. Tyler's desk phone rang 15 minutes later. Richard's voice was barely controlled rage, wrapped in deadly quiet tones. Conference room. Now. And bring your wife. Tyler called me at Lincoln Elementary, where I was finishing my lunch break between classes. My hands shook as I arranged for a substitute teacher to cover my afternoon sessions. The tone in Tyler's voice told me everything I needed to know. The reckoning had arrived. The drive to Whitman and Associates felt surreal. Federal vehicles were still parked outside the building, and employees continued to mill around uncertainly. Some recognized me as Tyler's wife and stared with open curiosity.
Others whispered behind their hands, clearly aware that something unprecedented was happening to the firm that had seemed untouchable just hours earlier. The conference room on the executive floor was a monument to corporate success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Portland's skyline, and the mahogany table could seat 20 people comfortably. Today, it held only 4 chairs, arranged like opposing sides in a negotiation that everyone knew had already failed. Victoria and Richard sat with their backs to the windows, silhouetted against the afternoon light like figures in a courtroom drama. Victoria had restored her composure somewhat, but her hands trembled slightly as she arranged papers in front of her. Richard's face was a mask of controlled fury, his usual commanding presence undermined by the knowledge that his authority was crumbling in real time.
Tyler and I took the seats across from them, and for several moments no one spoke. The silence was broken by the sound of voices in the hallway as investigators continued their methodical examination of the firm's records. Victoria spoke first, her voice carrying the brittle precision of someone barely maintaining control. Tyler, I want you to look me in the eye and tell me that you deliberately destroyed your own family's livelihood out of spite over a wedding invitation. Tyler met her gaze steadily. Mom, I reported criminal activity to the appropriate authorities because it was the right thing to do. The fact that you're my parent doesn't give you immunity from the consequences of breaking the law. Richard leaned forward across the table, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Do you have any idea what you've done? This firm employs 43 people. Those investigators out there aren't just examining our practices, they're destroying the livelihoods of everyone who works here. Dad, those 43 people deserve to work for a company that operated legally and ethically. You put their jobs at risk the moment you decided that rules didn't apply to you. Victoria's composure finally cracked. Rules? Tyler, we built this firm from nothing. We sacrificed everything to create something meaningful, something that could provide for our family for generations. And you've destroyed it, all because we didn't approve of your choice in women. I had remained silent up to this point, but Victoria's words demanded a response. Mrs. Whitman, your son didn't destroy your firm because you've disapproved of me. He reported your illegal activities because you used your disapproval as justification for systematic harassment, financial manipulation, and criminal behavior. Victoria turned her attention to me with undisguised hatred. You did this. You poisoned our son against his own family. You turned him into a weapon against the people who loved him most. No, Mrs. Whitman, you did this when you decided that love meant control and respect meant submission. Tyler didn't choose me over you. He chose honesty over corruption, integrity over manipulation. Richard stood abruptly and began pacing to the windows. Integrity? You want to talk about integrity? You're a school teacher who married into wealth and then used that position to destroy the source of that wealth. If that's not manipulation, I don't know what is. Tyler's voice cut through his father's accusations like a blade. Dad, Natalie tried to refuse the settlement offer you made. She chose poverty over compromise, chose fighting over fleeing. Everything you've accused her of being, she's proven she's not. The settlement offer was generous beyond reason, Victoria snapped. Any rational person would have taken that money and disappeared gratefully. The fact that she refused it only proves she was holding out for something bigger. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table, then opened the voice recorder app. Mrs. Whitman, I'm going to record what I'm about to say so there can be no misunderstandings later. I refused your settlement offer because accepting it would have required me to lie about my motivations, my character, and my marriage. I refused it because proving your prejudices wrong was worth more to me than $100,000. Victoria stared at the phone with alarm. You're recording this conversation without our consent. That's illegal. Tyler pulled out his own phone showing the recording app that had been running since we entered the room. Oregon is a one-party consent state. Either of us can legally record this conversation, just like you legally could have recorded us if you'd been honest about your surveillance instead of hiding it. Richard returned to the table and sat down heavily. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked his age. The federal investigation had stripped away his commanding presence, revealing an exhausted man facing the destruction of everything he'd built. Tyler, what do you want from us?
What would it take for you to call off this investigation? Tyler's response was immediate and firm.
Dad, I can't call off a federal investigation. The crimes you've committed are beyond my ability to forgive or ignore. The IRS doesn't care about family dynamics when prosecuting tax fraud. But you could refuse to cooperate with their investigation. You could claim attorney-client privilege, family confidentiality, anything to limit the damage. I could, but I won't. Do you know what I found in Marcus Thompson's files? Evidence that you've been stealing from charities, overcharging vulnerable clients, and discriminating against employees for years. This isn't about our family conflict anymore. This is about justice for people you've hurt. Victoria's mask of composure finally shattered completely. Justice? Tyler, you've sentenced your own parents to prison because we didn't think your wife was suitable for our social circle. What kind of son does that to his family? The kind of son who was raised to believe that integrity matters more than comfort, that right and wrong aren't negotiable based on family relationships. You taught me those values, Mom. I'm sorry you forgot them somewhere along the way. The conference room door opened, and a woman in a federal badge entered with a folder of documents. Mr. and Mrs. Whitman, I need to inform you that we've discovered additional evidence that will require expanded charges. We're going to need you to remain available for further questioning. Victoria stood shakily and gathered her purse. Tyler, I hope you're satisfied. You've destroyed everything our family built, everything we worked for, everything we dreamed of passing down to you. Tyler stood as well, his voice carrying a sadness that hadn't been there before. Mom, I'm not satisfied. I'm heartbroken. But you destroyed our family the moment you decided that money was more important than love, that status was more valuable than character. Richard paused at the door and turned back to face us. Tyler, when this is over, when we're in prison and the firm is bankrupt and your inheritance is gone, ask yourself if it was worth it. Ask yourself if your pride was worth destroying the people who gave you life. Tyler's response was quiet but unwavering. Dad, when this is over, I'll ask myself if I stood up for what was right when it mattered most. And the answer will be yes. The door closed behind them, leaving Tyler and me alone in the conference room that probably hosted thousands of business meetings, but never a family dissolution quite like this one. Tyler walked to the windows and stared out at the city below, his shoulders shaking with suppressed emotion. I joined him at the window and took his hand. Tyler, are you okay? He was quiet for a long moment before answering. Nat, I keep thinking about when I was 12 years old. Dad brought me to this office for the first time, showed me around, told me that someday all of this would be mine. I was so proud, so excited to be part of something important. What changed? I grew up and realized that what I thought was success was actually corruption. What I thought was family loyalty was actually enabling criminal behavior. What I thought was love was actually control disguised as concern. We stood together watching federal agents load boxes of evidence into their vehicles. Each box represented years of illegal activity, lives affected by the Whitmans' greed and manipulation. The investigation Tyler had initiated was bigger than our personal conflict. It was accountability for systematic wrongdoing that had harmed dozens of people. Tyler, do you regret what we've done? He turned to face me, his eyes clear despite the tears. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my parents chose crime over integrity, manipulation over love. But I don't regret standing up for what's right, and I don't regret protecting you from people who wanted to destroy our marriage. My phone buzzed with a text message from David Chen. Federal prosecutors want to meet with you both tomorrow morning. This is moving faster than anyone expected. Tyler read the message over my shoulder. Are you ready for this to get even more intense? I thought about the questions seriously. The next phase would involve testimony, depositions, potentially a trial that would be covered by local media. Our private family conflict was about to become public record, our personal pain transformed into legal evidence. Tyler, 3 months ago, your parents thought they could break us by making us choose between family approval and personal integrity. They never imagined we'd choose integrity and discover that we were strong enough to fight back. I'm ready for whatever comes next. We gathered our things and prepared to leave the conference room that had hosted the final confrontation between Tyler and his parents. As we walked through the building toward the elevator, employees stopped their conversations to stare. Some looked sympathetic, understanding that Tyler had blown the whistle on corruption. Others seemed accusatory, blaming him for the chaos that was destroying their workplace. In the elevator, Tyler pulled out his phone and deleted his parents' contact information. The action was symbolic, but necessary, a recognition that the people who had raised him were no longer part of his life in any meaningful way. Nat, when we get home, I want to call my Aunt Susan in Seattle. She's Dad's sister, but she's always been different from the rest of the family. More honest, more genuine. I want her to hear our side of the story before the media coverage starts. I nodded, understanding Tyler's need to maintain some family connections even as he severed ties with his parents. Aunt Susan had always been kind to me during family gatherings, asking genuine questions about my teaching career and treating me like a person rather than a social threat. The drive home was quiet, both of us processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Tyler had effectively orphaned himself to protect our marriage and expose his parents' crimes. The cost was enormous, but so was the principle at stake. At home, Tyler made the call to his aunt while I prepared dinner. I could hear his voice from the kitchen explaining the situation with painful honesty. When he finished the call 20 minutes later, his expression was thoughtful. What did she say? She said she'd been wondering when someone would finally hold Dad accountable for his behavior. Apparently, the family has known about his ethical problems for years, but everyone was too afraid of his money and influence to say anything. Tyler sat down at our kitchen table and looked around our modest home. Nat, this might be all we ever have. No inheritance, no family business, no financial safety net. My parents' legal bills will probably consume everything they own, and I'll be lucky to find another job in accounting after this scandal. I sat down across from him and took his hands. Tyler, do you remember what you told me on our first date? You said you wanted to help small businesses succeed, to use your skills to make a real difference in people's lives. That dream is still possible, maybe even more possible now that you're free from your parents' expectations. Tyler's smile was small but genuine. You're right. I can start my own practice, work with people who actually need help instead of wealthy clients who just want to avoid taxes. I can build something honest. And I can keep teaching, keep working with kids who need someone to believe in them. We can build a life based on what we believe in rather than what other people expect from us. That evening, we sat on our small porch watching the sunset over our neighborhood. Children played in yards while their parents prepared dinner, building families based on love rather than wealth. It was the life Tyler's parents had dismissed as beneath their standards, but it was the life we had chosen to defend. The federal investigation would continue for months, ultimately resulting in prison sentences for both Victoria and Richard Whitman. The firm would be dissolved, its assets seized to compensate defrauded clients. Tyler would testify at their trial, providing crucial evidence about their pattern of manipulation and abuse. But tonight, none of that mattered.
Tonight, we were simply a married couple who had refused to let money, status, or family pressure destroy what we had built together. We had confronted people who believed power made them untouchable and proved that sometimes truth is more powerful than wealth. Tyler squeezed my hand as the last light faded from the sky. Nat, do you think we'll ever have a normal relationship with family again? I considered the question, thinking about my own mother, who had supported our marriage despite the social pressure from Tyler's parents. We'll have family, Tyler. It just might not look like what you expected growing up. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who choose to love and support each other. You mean like Cassandra? She texted me this afternoon. She's looking for a new job, but she wants to stay in touch. She said watching us fight back gave her courage to stand up for herself, too. I smiled, thinking about Tyler's sister who had found her own strength in our example. And like Lauren, who's been my family since college. And like David Chen, who's become more than just our lawyer. And like all the teachers at Lincoln Elementary who've supported me through this whole ordeal. Tyler nodded, understanding dawning in his expression. So we're not losing family? We're discovering who our real family actually is.
Exactly. And our real family is made up of people who love us for who we are, not what we can provide them or how we make them look to others. As we prepared for bed that night, Tyler paused in our bedroom doorway. Nat, tomorrow the prosecutors are going to ask us to relive all of this in detail. They're going to want dates, times, specific quotes. Are you ready to tell our story officially? I looked at our wedding photo on the dresser, remembering the empty chairs where Tyler's parents should have been sitting. Tyler, I've been ready to tell our story since the day they decided we weren't worth their attendance. Tomorrow, we make sure their version of events isn't the only one that matters. The federal courthouse in downtown Portland buzzed with activity on the morning of October 12th. News vans lined the street outside, their satellite dishes reaching toward an overcast sky that seemed to mirror the gravity of the proceedings inside. Tyler and I walked through the media gauntlet hand in hand, ignoring the shouted questions about family betrayal and corporate corruption. The courtroom was packed with reporters, former clients of Whitman and Associates, and employees whose lives had been upended by the investigation Tyler had initiated 4 months earlier. Victoria and Richard sat at the defendant's table with their attorney, both looking dramatically older than they had during our final confrontation in their conference room. Tyler took the witness stand at 9:30 a.m. sharp. His testimony was methodical and devastating, detailing not just the harassment campaign against our marriage, but the pattern of illegal business practices he had observed during his 3 years at the firm. He spoke with quiet authority about forged documents, inflated billing, and the systematic exploitation of vulnerable clients. The defense attorney tried to paint Tyler as a vindictive son seeking revenge against parents who had simply expressed concern about his marriage choices. Tyler's response was measured but firm. "Your Honor, this case isn't about my parents' opinion of my wife. It's about their decision to use criminal methods to enforce that opinion, and their broader pattern of using illegal tactics to maintain control over employees, clients, and family members." Victoria's testimony was a masterclass in deflection and self-pity. She portrayed herself as a devoted mother whose only crime was wanting the best for her son. She claimed that Tyler had misunderstood business practices that were standard in their industry, that his emotional response to family conflict had clouded his judgment about legitimate professional activities. When the prosecutor asked about the settlement offer she had made to me, Victoria's composure cracked slightly.
We offered Miss Brooks a generous financial arrangement to help her start fresh after what we believed would be an inevitable divorce. It was an act of kindness, not manipulation. Mrs. Whitman, this generous arrangement required Miss Brooks to sign a confession stating that she had married your son for financial gain. How was requiring a false confession an act of kindness? Victoria's pause stretched long enough that the judge prompted her to answer. We believed the confession would be truthful. Our son had never shown interest in women from her background before. The prosecutor then played recordings of Victoria and Richard discussing their campaign against our marriage, their plans to make my life miserable, and their satisfaction at successfully ruining Tyler's wedding day. Victoria listened to her own voice with visible discomfort, realizing that her private cruelty was now public record. Richard's testimony was equally damaging to their defense. He attempted to justify the firm's illegal practices as necessary measures to remain competitive in a challenging industry. When confronted with evidence of charity fraud, he claimed that mixing personal and client funds was an accounting error rather than intentional theft. The prosecutor's final question to Richard was devastating in its simplicity. Mr. Whitman, in all your years of business, did you ever consider that your actions might be illegal? Richard's answer revealed the entitlement that had driven his criminal behavior. I considered whether my actions were effective. In business, effectiveness matters more than technicalities. The trial lasted 6 days. Expert witnesses testified about the financial damage caused by the Whitmans' fraud. Former employees described the hostile work environment and discriminatory practices. Clients explained how they had been overcharged and manipulated into unnecessary financial products.
Tyler and I sat in the gallery each day, watching the methodical destruction of the image Victoria and Richard had spent decades building. They had presented themselves as pillars of the community, successful business owners who embodied traditional values and professional excellence. The trial revealed them as criminals who had used their reputation to exploit others systematically. On the final day, before closing arguments, the judge allowed victim impact statements. An elderly woman named Dorothy Chen spoke about losing her retirement savings to investment products Richard had recommended despite knowing they were inappropriate for her situation. I trusted Mr. Whitman because he seemed so professional, so knowledgeable. He told me the investments would provide secure income for my golden years. Instead, I lost everything and had to move in with my daughter because I couldn't afford my apartment anymore. A former employee named James Rodriguez described the hostile environment at Whitman and Associates, where advancement opportunities were reserved for people who fit the partner's social profile. I worked there for 8 years, consistently exceeding my performance targets, but I was passed over for promotions repeatedly while less qualified candidates from wealthy families were advanced ahead of me. When I finally complained about the disparity, I was terminated for attitude problems. The most powerful statement came from Margaret Foster, who ran a children's literacy charity that had been defrauded by Victoria's scheme. Mrs. Whitman served on our board for 3 years, using her position to steer accounting contracts to her firm while secretly funding her donations with money that belonged to our organization. That stolen money was supposed to buy books for disadvantaged children. Instead, it bought Mrs. Whitman's social status and business connections. When the victim statements concluded, Tyler stood and asked permission to address the court. The judge granted his request, and Tyler walked to the podium with the same quiet determination he had shown throughout the proceedings. Your Honor, I want the court to understand that I didn't initiate this investigation to hurt my parents.
I did it to protect my wife from harassment and to expose illegal activities that were harming innocent people. My parents raised me to believe that integrity matters more than comfort, that doing the right thing is worth personal sacrifice. I'm heartbroken that they forgot those values, but I'm grateful they taught them to me well enough that I recognized corruption when I saw it. Tyler paused, looking directly at his parents for the first time during the trial. I love my parents, but I love justice more. I hope someday they'll understand that accountability isn't punishment, it's the foundation of redemption. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Victoria and Richard were found guilty on all counts: fraud, charity theft, tax evasion, and multiple violations of professional ethics standards. The courtroom erupted in quiet satisfaction as victims saw justice served after years of exploitation. During sentencing 2 weeks later, Victoria received 4 years in federal prison plus restitution orders totaling $800,000. Richard received 6 years plus restitution exceeding $1 million. Both were permanently barred from practicing accounting and serving on nonprofit boards. The judge's comments during sentencing reflected the broader impact of their crimes. Mr. and Mrs. Whitman, you violated the trust of clients who relied on your expertise, employees who deserved fair treatment, and charitable organizations that serve vulnerable populations. Your actions caused real harm to real people, and the fact that you used your professional reputation to facilitate these crimes makes them even more serious. After sentencing, Tyler and I stood outside the courthouse facing a cluster of reporters. Tyler made a brief statement that we had prepared together. Justice has been served today, not just for my wife and me, but for everyone who was harmed by illegal business practices at Whitman and Associates. We hope this case demonstrates that nobody is above the law, regardless of their wealth, status, or family connections. A reporter asked if Tyler regretted turning in his own parents. His answer was immediate and clear. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my parents chose crime over integrity. But I don't regret standing up for what's right, and I never will. The dissolution of Whitman and Associates created opportunities that none of us had anticipated. Tyler used his knowledge of the client base to start his own practice, Brooks and Whitman Accounting, focusing on small businesses and nonprofit organizations. Many former clients followed him there, appreciating his honesty about the firm's previous practices and his commitment to ethical business methods. Cassandra joined Tyler's new firm as operations manager, bringing with her several other former employees who had been marginalized under Victoria and Richard's leadership.
The workplace culture Tyler created was collaborative and inclusive, everything his parents' firm had not been. I continued teaching at Lincoln Elementary, but the trial had given me a platform to speak about financial literacy and consumer protection. I began conducting workshops for parents and community groups, teaching people how to recognize predatory business practices and protect themselves from financial exploitation. 6 months after the trial, Tyler and I received an unexpected visitor. Dorothy Chen, the elderly woman who had lost her retirement savings, came to Tyler's office with a small gift. "Mr. Whitman, I wanted to thank you for having the courage to expose what your parents were doing. Because of your testimony, I'm receiving restitution payments that will help me regain some financial stability. More importantly, you showed me that there are still honest people in the business world." Tyler was visibly moved by her words. "Mrs. Chen, I'm just sorry it took so long for someone to hold them accountable. You deserved better treatment from the beginning." Dorothy smiled and handed Tyler a framed photograph of children reading in a library.
This is the new literacy center that Margaret Foster's charity was able to open with the restitution money they received. Those children are learning to read because you chose justice over family loyalty. Tyler kept that photograph on his desk as a reminder that individual choices can have far-reaching consequences. His decision to report his parents' crimes had affected dozens of lives positively, creating opportunities for justice, restitution, and genuine business relationships built on trust rather than exploitation. Our marriage grew stronger through the ordeal, tested by pressure that would have destroyed relationships built on less solid foundations. We learned to rely on each other completely, to communicate openly about fears and doubts, and to make decisions based on shared values rather than external expectations. 2 years after the trial, Tyler and I bought our first house together. It was modest compared to the Whitman family estate, but it was ours, purchased with money Tyler had earned honestly through his new practice. We planted a garden in the backyard and adopted a rescue dog named Justice, who greeted clients with enthusiasm and helped create a welcoming atmosphere in Tyler's office. The house became a gathering place for the family we had chosen rather than inherited. Lauren visited regularly with her new boyfriend, a teacher she had met through me. Cassandra brought her children for Sunday dinners, grateful for the uncle who had shown her that family loyalty didn't require accepting abuse. David Chen and his wife became close friends, bonding over shared values and professional respect. On our 3rd wedding anniversary, Tyler and I returned to Riverside Gardens Estate for a private ceremony to renew our vows. This time, the front row was filled with people who had chosen to be there, who supported our marriage without reservation or agenda. Lauren served as maid of honor again, and Cassandra stood as Tyler's best woman, symbolizing the family bonds that had survived the destruction of others. During the ceremony, Tyler spoke about the journey we had traveled together. 3 years ago, we promised to love each other through good times and bad. We couldn't have imagined how bad the bad times would get, or how much stronger we would become by facing them together. Natalie, you taught me that real love isn't about fitting into someone else's expectations. It's about building something authentic together, even when that means standing alone against the whole world. I responded with words that came from hard-won wisdom. Tyler, you taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right despite being terrified. You chose integrity over inheritance, truth over comfort, and justice over family approval. You showed me what real strength looks like. After the ceremony, we hosted a reception in our backyard for the 40 people who had supported us through our darkest period. The celebration was simple but joyful, filled with genuine laughter and heartfelt toasts. Margaret Foster spoke about the Children's Literacy Center, now thriving thanks to the restitution funds. James Rodriguez announced his promotion to partner at a firm that valued his contributions. Dorothy Chen shared news of her financial recovery and her decision to volunteer as a mentor for other fraud victims. As the evening wound down, Tyler and I stood together watching our chosen family enjoy each other's company. Children played on the swing set Tyler had built while adults shared stories and made plans for future gatherings. It was everything Victoria and Richard had dismissed as beneath their standards, but it was the life we had fought to protect and build. The story of our wedding day betrayal had become something larger than personal revenge or family conflict. It had become a testament to the power of individual integrity to create change, to the possibility of building authentic relationships based on respect rather than obligation.
and to the idea that justice is worth pursuing even when it costs everything you thought you wanted. Tyler's phone buzzed with a news alert about a corporate fraud case in Seattle, where his testimony had been cited as a precedent for family members reporting financial crimes. Our story had encouraged others to come forward with evidence of corruption, creating a ripple effect of accountability that extended far beyond our personal situation. Nat, do you think we'll ever hear from my parents again? I considered the question, thinking about Victoria and Richard in their respective federal prisons, probably still convinced that they were victims of their son's betrayal rather than architects of their own destruction. I think they'll reach out eventually, but not because they've changed. They'll contact you when they need something, when their appeals are exhausted, or when they're facing release and need family support. The question is whether you'll be ready for that conversation. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that too. Part of me hopes they'll eventually understand why I did what I did, maybe even apologize for their behavior. But I'm not going to wait for that understanding before moving forward with my life. And if they never change, then I'll be sad about the parents I wish I'd had, but grateful for the family I've actually built. Blood relationships aren't automatically sacred. They have to be earned and maintained through love, respect, and honest communication. As we cleaned up after the party, Tyler found a card that had been left on our kitchen counter. It was from a young woman named Sarah Kim, a new client whose small business Tyler had helped incorporate legally and ethically. Mr. and Mrs. Whitman, thank you for showing me that there are business professionals who care more about helping their clients succeed than about maximizing their own profits. Your integrity gives me hope that I can build something honest and sustainable. Tyler smiled as he read the card aloud. You know what I realized today, Nat? My parents were wrong about everything. They thought wealth and status would bring them happiness and security. Instead, their greed brought them prison and disgrace. We chose love and integrity, and we ended up with genuine happiness and real security. What do you mean by real security? I mean the security that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for, from building relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation, from working with people who respect you rather than fear you, from going to sleep every night knowing you've acted with integrity. I looked around our kitchen with its secondhand furniture and modest appliances, then compared it to the opulent conference room where we had faced Tyler's parents for the last time. The contrast was stark, but the choice was clear. Tyler, do you remember what your mother said about people at the bottom feeling important? She meant it as an insult, but she was accidentally right. We are at the bottom in terms of wealth and social status, but we're at the top in terms of what actually matters: love, integrity, authentic relationships, and the respect of people whose opinions are worth having. Tyler pulled me close, and we stood together in our kitchen surrounded by the evidence of our chosen life. Wedding photos with friends who had celebrated us genuinely, thank you cards from clients who appreciated honest service, children's artwork from my students, certificates from community organizations where we volunteered. Nat, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. If you could go back and change everything, if you could have parents-in-law who welcomed you warmly and never caused us a moment's conflict, would you? I thought about the question seriously. A life without the harassment, the investigation, the trial, the estrangement from Tyler's family would certainly have been easier, but it also would have meant Tyler never fully understanding his parents' character, never developing the strength to choose integrity over comfort, never building the kind of marriage that could withstand any pressure.
Tyler, if your parents had been different people, you might have been different too. You might have been content with the comfortable corruption, might have chosen their approval over your own values. The crisis forced us to decide who we really were and what we really believed in. I wouldn't trade that clarity for all the family acceptance in the world. Tyler's eyes filled with tears of gratitude and relief. That's exactly how I feel. The pain was terrible, but it was also purifying. It burned away everything that wasn't essential, everything that wasn't real. Later that evening, as we prepared for bed in our small but comfortable bedroom, Tyler paused at the dresser where our wedding photo still held a place of honor. The picture showed us exchanging vows in front of friends and family with two conspicuously empty chairs in the front row. You know what's funny about this photo? For months, I saw those empty chairs as evidence of loss, proof that my family had abandoned me. Now I see them as evidence of freedom, proof that we built something real without their approval or involvement. I joined him at the dresser, looking at the younger versions of ourselves who had no idea what trials lay ahead. Those empty chairs forced us to fill our lives with people who actually wanted to be there. Maybe that's the real lesson. Sometimes what looks like rejection is actually redirection towards something better. Tyler turned off the bedroom light, and we settled into bed together. Outside our window, the neighborhood was quiet, except for the distant sound of laughter from a late dinner party somewhere down the street. It was the sound of other families, other couples, building lives based on love rather than obligation. Nat, what do you think people will remember about our story? I considered the question in the darkness. I hope they'll remember that standing up for what's right is always worth it, even when the cost seems unbearable. I hope they'll remember that authentic love is stronger than family pressure, that integrity is more valuable than inheritance, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst behavior. Tyler's voice was sleepy but content. I hope they'll remember that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who choose to love and support each other, especially when things get difficult. As sleep began to claim us both, I thought about Dorothy Chen reading to children in the literacy center, about James Rodriguez thriving in a workplace that valued his contributions, about Margaret Foster building programs that would help disadvantaged kids for years to come. Our personal struggle had created opportunities for healing and growth that extended far beyond our immediate situation. Tyler's breathing deepened as he drifted off to sleep. I stayed awake a few minutes longer, grateful for the man beside me who had chosen love over luxury, truth over comfort, and justice over family approval. We had lost the family he was born into, but gained the family we had created together. We had sacrificed financial security, but gained something more valuable: the unshakable knowledge that our love could withstand any test. The story that began with empty chairs at our wedding had become a testament to the chairs we had chosen to fill our lives with since then. People who celebrated our successes, supported us through difficulties, and reminded us daily that authentic relationships are worth fighting for. In the morning, we would wake up and continue building the life we had defended so fiercely. Tyler would help honest business owners navigate financial challenges ethically. I would teach children to read and think critically about the world around them. Together, we would continue demonstrating that integrity and love are more powerful than wealth and status. But tonight, we slept peacefully in our modest home, surrounded by the evidence of choices well made and battles worth fighting. We had learned that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted is the only way to discover what you actually need.
And what we needed was exactly what we had found in each other: unconditional love, unwavering support, and the courage to stand together against any force that tried to tear us apart. Our story had started with a wedding that his parents chose to miss. It had become a marriage that could survive anything, built on foundations that no amount of money or social pressure could shake. We had proven that love chosen freely is stronger than love demanded by blood, that respect earned through character is more valuable than deference commanded by authority. The empty chairs at our wedding had taught us the most important lesson of all. The only approval that matters is the approval of people whose values align with your own. Everyone else is just an uninvited guest who chose not to attend, and their absence says everything about them and nothing about you. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.